Hello everyone, this is VKB. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to discuss in detail one of the greatest writers of the Renaissance period or the Elizabethan period, that is Edmund Spenser. As far as Master Cadre exam is concerned or UGC NET, Edmund Spenser always stands as an important figure. Almost in each paper or in each exam which have been conducted so far, you'll find one or two questions related to Edmund Spenser. So, I'm going to discuss this author in deep detail. Edmund Spenser was born in 1552. 1552 and he died in 1599, means when he was only 47 years old. He is one of the greatest poets in English language so far. ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੋਇਟਸ ਆਏ ਨੇ, ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਲਿਸਟ ਬਣਾਈਏ ਦ ਗ੍ਰੇਟੈਸਟ ਦੀ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਐਡਮੰਡ ਸਪੈਂਸਰ definitely stands high. He received a scholarship to attend the Merchant Taylor School, where he likely studied Latin language and Greek language. He went on to study literature and religion at Cambridge University's Pembroke Hall as a Caesar. Who is a Caesar? A student who earns his tuition fee by acting as a servant to wealthy students. Means his classmates, ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚੋਂ means wealthy students ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ servant type ਕੁਝ students ਰੱਖ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਫੀਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਭਰ ਕੇ, right? So in this way he got his education, receiving a BA in 1573 and then post-graduation, that is MA in 1576. He was a translator. In the starting of his career, he started by translating the work of the ancient great writers, and he was especially an admirer of Du Bellay, a French poet and critic. Next point is very important as an MCQ. He calls Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, his revered master. Revered means respectable master. Well of English undefiled. This is a frequently asked question. Who calls Chaucer well of English undefiled? Answer is Edmund Spenser. Well of English undefiled. Now, what does this phrase mean? Undefiled means that is not defiled, means not polluted or corrupted. जो pollute नहीं होया, जो corrupt नहीं होया, means जो pure है. मीनस उसकी नज़र ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੈਫਰੀ ਚੌਸਰ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਵੈਲ ਆਫ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਅਨਡਿਫਾਈਲਡ ਹੈ, ਮੀਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਿਓਰ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਰਾਈਟਰਸ ਨੇ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਰਪਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏ. ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸੀ ਚੌਸਰ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਚ, ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਡਿਸਕਸਡ ਕਿ ਜੈਫਰੀ ਚੌਸਰ ਜੋ ਹੈ father of modern English language. So according to Edmund Spenser, Geoffrey Chaucer is one of those English writers who remained pure in every form. Next point. Along with Sir Philip Sidney, Edward Dyer, and Phil Greville, Spenser created the literary group called Areopagus. Philip Sidney, another important author of his period, Edward Dyer and Phil Greville, they were not so important. Along with these poets, Spenser created a literary group which was called Areopagus. This is something from Latin language. Gabriel Harvey, Next point, Gabriel Harvey, whom he considered his mentor. Mentor means advisor, guide, and ultimately his literary promoter, who promoted his literary work. It was Gabriel Harvey. He was basically a professor of rhetoric, means speech, language. And Edmund considered Harvey his mentor and his literary promoter. And Spenser later celebrated their friendship in The Shepherd's Calendar. This is name of a book written by Edmund Spenser. It was actually the first book. In this book, he celebrated his friendship, in which he appears, he stands for Spenser. Spenser खुद इस बुक ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਲਿਨ ਕਲਾਊਡ ਇੱਕ ਕੈਰੈਕਟਰ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਸਪੈਂਸਰ ਖੁਦ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਹਾਰਵੇ ਨੂੰ ਉਸਨੇ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਵਾਈਜ਼ ਸ਼ੈਫਰਡ ਹੋਬਿਨੋ ਮੀਨਸ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਬੀ ਆਸਕਡ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਆ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ कि who is Colin Clout in The Shepherd's Calendar? It was Edmund Spenser. And who was Hobinol? It was Gabriel Harvey. Next point. In 1598, during the 9 Years' War, Spenser was driven from his home in Ireland. He was born in Ireland, but due to certain reasons, especially for a war, he had to leave his house. He died in London in 1599, next year. After leaving his house, he died in London and was buried in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. Westminster Abbey is the name of a churchyard, and there is established a Poets' Corner where most of the important poets, famous poets, are buried, and Chaucer was the first poet to be buried there, and it is an honor, we can say, for a poet to be buried there. And Spenser was buried in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson is a contemporary of Spenser, and he claims that Spenser died of want of bread, means in poverty. Ben Jonson claims that Spenser died of poverty. This is basic introduction about Edmund Spenser. I repeat the important points here, which you must keep in mind, which are very important from MCQ point of view. This is an important point. This is another important point. And this one. Next, we move to his literary creation, his main work. And I told you the first book that we are going to start here, that is The Shepherd's Calendar, which he wrote in 1579. The Shepherd's Calendar, calendar word refers to years, months, means time. It was his first major poetic work. First major poetic work. Next point is very important. It was dedicated to Philip Sidney. The name already mentioned, and he was a friend, a contemporary poet. He died in a war, Philip Sidney, so he dedicated this poem to Sidney. This book, this poem, we can see it was wrote in emulation, means copy of Virgil. Virgil is a great ancient writer. Emulation of Virgil's first work, the Eclogues. What is an eclogue? This is basically a literary term, but I have defined it here. An eclogue is a short pastoral poem. Pastoral means a rural poem that is in the form of a dialogue means involving two people, or it can be a soliloquy. Soliloquy means talking to self, अपने आप नाल गल्लां करनियां, मतलब ਇਹ डायलॉग भी हो सकता है, ਇਹ soliloquy भी हो सकती है, अपने आप नाल गल्लां करनी भी हो सकती है. It is basically a short pastoral poem. Pastoral, I told you, means a rural poem, nature poem, we can say, that is in the form of a dialogue or a soliloquy. So this is another important point to remember here. Next point, the poem introduces Colin Clout, a folk character. In this poem, he introduced a folk character, means we can say a rural character. Basically, Colin Clout was originated by John Skelton. John Skelton was a poet before Edmund Spenser. He introduced a Colin Clout named character. Spenser took this character from John Skelton, depicts his life, reveals his life as a shepherd through the 12 months of the year. This is what makes it a calendar. 12 months, January, February, उसकी लाइफ को दिखाया गया है, कॉलिन क्लाउट की लाइफ को, through the 12 months of the year. That makes it a calendar, the shepherd's calendar. Although all the months together form an entire year, but each month stands alone as a separate poem. कि वैसे ਤਾਂ 12 ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ 12 ਪਾਰਟਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਮਿਲ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਈਅਰ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਬਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ ਪੋਇਮ ਦੇ ਪਾਰਟਸ ਨੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੈਪਰੇਟ ਪੋਇਮ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਰੀਡ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. ਨੈਕਸਟ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ, Colin Clout is Edmund's pastoral name for himself. This point we have already discussed. Edmund Spenser ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਪੋਇਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ Colin Clout ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕੀਤਾ. Colin Clout, who excels in poetry but is ruined by his hopeless love for one Rosalind, means he was a dejected lover. He was a very good poet, but his hopeless love, his one-sided love for a woman named Rosalind, ruined him. And Colin Clout, as I told you, is Spenser himself, because this is a well-known fact that Spenser himself was in love with Queen Elizabeth. The eclogue April means 4th month, as well as the 4th song of this poem, is in praise of the shepherdess Eliza. Eliza actually represents Queen Elizabeth I. As I told you, it is a well-known fact that Edmund Spenser was in love with Queen Elizabeth I. So in a way, we can say this poem reveals Edmund Spenser's one-sided love for Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth, Eliza stands for Queen Elizabeth, and Colin Clout stands for Spenser. Similarly, another poem in this section, that is October, examines the various kinds of verse compositions and suggests how discouraging is for a modern poet to try for success in any of them. Anyway, this is not so much relevant point. Most of the eclogues, however, concern good or bad shepherds, that is pastors of Christian congregations. Pastor means father. Priest means shepherds represent clergy of the time. Some of them were good and some of them were bad. Similarly, in this poem, there are some good shepherds, there are some bad shepherds. They represent Christian congregations, that is Christian, we can say people following Christianity. Published under the pseudonym Emeritus. This is another important point. He didn't make use of his original, his real name. Rather, he published it under a pen name, that is pseudonym Emeritus. Main poem deals with main 3 themes. These are love, poetry, and religion. So this was the first poem, first composition of Edmund Spenser, first major composition that made him famous, which is known as the Shepherd's Calendar. Next, his next composition is Complaints, containing sundry. Remind you, he wrote these spellings of sundry. Nowadays we use different spellings, but it doesn't matter. Complaints containing sundry small poems of the world's vanity. Vanity means show off, दिखावा. So कुछ छोटे छोटे poems उसने लिखियां जिस च उसने जो world's vanities ने ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ represent ਕੀਤਾ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ complaints ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ. This is generally known as complaints, and it was a collection of 9 poems. There were total 9 complaints, we can say, and I've given the names of 9 poems. First is The Ruins of Time. It was a long lamentation over the ruins of Verulam. Again, this is something irrelevant, you need not remember. Second is The Tears of the Muses, Virgil's Knot, Prosopoeia. This is important and we shall discuss in detail. Or Mother Hubbard's Tale. Then we have Ruins of Rome. Then we have Muib Thomas, or The Fate of the Butterfly. It was a personal poem in the section to explain poets' voluptuous. Voluptuous means lusty nature. Next we have Visions of the World's Vanity. Then the Visions of Ballet, the Visions of Petrarch. These are not important. Means in this book, the things you have to remember कि की याद रखना तुसी इत्थे कंप्लेंट्स ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ टोटल 9 poems ਸੀਗੇ बस यही एक इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है जो तुसी ਇੱਥੇ याद रखना. Next is Prosopopoeia or Mother Hubbard's Tale that he wrote in 1578 or 79. It was basically an allegory. Now, what is an allegory? Allegory is a poem that contains 2 meanings, surface meaning and bottom meaning. Surface meaning and bottom meaning means there will be a simple story at the surface, but at the bottom there will be a deep meaning, a moral in a sense. And such a poem, such a story is known as allegory, allegorical poem. And Prosopopoeia is in the form of a fable or an allegorical poem. Fable is part of allegory. Allegory is of 2 types, fable and parable. Fable and parable, what is the difference? Fable means an animal story, means the poem or the story in which the main characters are animals or birds. That is known as fable. Next point, the poem brings out his rancor. Rancor means bitterness, gathered against Lord Burleigh, the great treasurer of Queen Elizabeth. उसके खिलाफ उसने अपनी जो पड़ास है, अपनी कड़वाहट है, वो इस पोएम के जरिए कढ़ी. There's a reason कि सीगा Burleigh is hidden in the form of the fox in the fable of Ape and the Fox. This is the fable of Ape and the Fox, which constitutes Mother Hubbard's Tale. Lord Burleigh जो है, he was in fact against Edmund Spenser's rise in the royal court. So he suppressed his advances many times, so that's why he was against him. So उसनु criticize ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਲਈ Lord Burleigh ਨੂੰ ਉਸਨੇ ਇਹ poem, ਉਸਨੇ ਇਹ story ਲਿਖੀ allegorically. Allegorically means ਉਸਨੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ birds या animals ਨੂੰ use ਕੀਤਾ like ape and the fox. Direct comment ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ, direct satire ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ ਉਸਨੇ indirect satire ਕੀਤਾ. ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ allegory ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. Published in 1591 as a part of Spenser's collection. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹੋ Spenser ਦੀ collection ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਸੀਗਾ Complaints. The poem follows the story of a sick, bedridden poet who has visitors who try to entertain him with stories. ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੋਇਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਬੈਡ ਰਿਡਨ ਹੈ, ਮੀਨਸ ਹੀ ਇਜ਼ ਸਿਕ, ਉਹ ਬੈੱਡ ਤੇ ਪਿਆ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਸਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟਰਸ ਮਿਲਣ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਉਸਨੂੰ ਐਂਟਰਟੇਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਹੈ ਮਦਰ ਹਬਰਡਸ ਟੇਲ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਇਜ਼ ਇੰਪॉर्टेंट। जो नेक्स्ट बुक है वो इंपॉर्टेंट है। दिस इज एस्ट्रोफिल, a pastoral elegy upon the death of the most noble and valorous means brave knight, Sir Philip Sidney. It published in 1595. Elegy means a death song, a song written on somebody's death, to mourn somebody's death. So this poem, Astrophil, he composed this poem to commemorate Sir Philip Sidney, whom he calls the most noble, सबसे अच्छा, and valorous means brave, bahadur knight, Sir Philip Sidney. It was Spenser's tribute to the memory of Sir Philip Sidney, who had died in 1586 in a war, I told you, and was dedicated to, this poem he dedicated to the most beautiful and virtuous lady, the Countess of Essex. Remind you, he has used these spellings. This is Old English actually, now the spellings have changed. Virtuous lady, the Countess of Essex. Countess in Punjabi we can say Begum. Essex is name of a state, एक रियासत दा नाम है Countess of Essex. उसका नाम सीगा फ्रांसिस वॉलसिंघम एंड शी वॉज सिडनीज वाइफ, सिडनीज विडो। तो उसनों उसने ही डेडिकेट की थी ते इस दे विच उसने ट्रिब्यूट दिती सी फिलिप सिडनी नूं इस पोएम दे जरिए। इनफैक्ट उसने ही टाइटल कित्थों लिया सी, एस्ट्रोफिल। Philip Sidney was a poet as well. Philip Sidney had written a sonnet sequence, Astrophil and Stella. Philip Sidney ने एक sonnet sequence लिखी सी जिसका नाम सी Astrophil and Stella। उथों उसने ये टाइटल लिया Edmund Spenser ने, Astrophil. Astrophil means a lover of star. Astrophil का मीनिंग होता है a star lover, a lover of star. Stella means star. Astrophil and Stella. The Astrophil उसने Philip Sidney दी ही poem दे title चों लिया। The poem is a veiled. Veiled means hidden, means indirect description of the actual events leading up to Sidney's death in the Battle of Zutphen. This is name of the battle in which Sidney had died. Now these are historical happenings. Battle of Zutphen, why was this battle fought? It was fought between what and what. These things do not matter for us. You simply remember this thing, that he died in the Battle of Zutphen. The Netherlands are transformed into a forest, wide and waste. Netherland को एक forest के तौर पर दिखाया गया, which is wide and waste. The Spaniards who shot him, people who shot him, the Spaniards, into the British nation, and the Dutch, means people of Netherlands, among whom Sidney died, into a sort of shepherds, means Netherland के लोगों को shepherds के तौर पर दिखाया गया है और जिन्होंने उन पर अटैक किया, they are Spaniards. The period between Sidney's wounding, means getting injured, and death is imaged in the 10 stanzas between Astrophil's wounding and death. मतलब पोएम ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਸਟ੍ਰੋਫਿਲ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਈਲਡ ਬੋਰ, ਇੱਕ ਜੰਗਲੀ ਸੂਰ ਅਟੈਕ ਕਰਕੇ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਹੋਣ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਉਸੇ ਡੈਥ ਤੱਕ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਸਿਡਨੀ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਹੋਣ ਤੇ ਡੈਥ ਤੱਕ ਦੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਦਿਖਾਇਆ ਹੈ। Sidney is shown as a shepherd injured to death by a boar, means again this is, we can say, an allegorical poem ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਡਨੀ ਦੇ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਤੇ ਉਸਦੀ ਡੈਥ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵੀਲਡ ਹਿਡਨ ਵੇ ਨਾਲ ਦਿਖਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ। सो थोड़े लिए जो इतने याद रखने वाली चीज है वो है एस्ट्रोफिल जो है इट इज अ ट्रिब्यूट to Philip Sidney by Edmund Spenser, and it was dedicated to Sidney's wife. And Sidney is shown as a shepherd injured to death by a boar. That's all for this video. I will continue with Edmund Spenser in my next video. Thank you.